There are moments in life that don't announce themselves. They don't come with warning signs or flashing lights or a gentle tap on the shoulder. They come quietly, disguised as an ordinary Tuesday, a regular phone call, a casual comment from someone who had no idea they were about to change everything you thought you knew. This is one of those moments. And I want you to sit with me for a while because this story isn't just mine. I think somewhere in these words you're going to find a piece of your OWN. My name is Claire. I am 34 years old. And for most of my adult life, I have been the kind of person who holds everything together. For herself, for her family, for anyone who needed a steady hand. I was the responsible one, the reliable one, the daughter who never caused problems, never asked for too much, never made anyone uncomfortable with her needs. That I was raised to believe that was a virtue. That it took me 34 years to understand it was also a vulnerability. Let me take you back, not to the beginning of the betrayal but to the beginning of me. Because to understand what happened you have to understand who I was before it did. I grew up in a middle-class home. Nothing extraordinary. A house with a blue front door in a quiet neighborhood where everyone knew each other's names. My father was a salesman, charming, warm, the kind of man who could walk into any room and leave with 3 new friends. My mother was softer, gentle. She had a garden in the backyard that she tended like it was sacred. Rose bushes along the fence. Lavender near the porch steps. Every spring that backyard smelled like something out of a dream. We were not wealthy, but we were comfortable. And we were, I believed, a family that loved each other. But even as a little girl I noticed things. I noticed how my father would lend money to uncles who never paid it back, and how he'd wave it off with a laugh like it didn't matter. I noticed how my mother never argued with his decisions, even when her eyes said she wanted to. I noticed how there was always someone at our dinner table who needed something. A cousin between jobs, a neighbor in a rough patch, a family friend with a complicated story. And how my parents never once said no. Generosity is a beautiful thing. But generosity without boundaries has a price. And in our house, that price was slowly being paid. In savings accounts quietly drained. In retirement plans quietly abandoned. In future security quietly traded away for the comfort of the present moment. That I saw it. I didn't fully understand it as a child. But I felt it. And so, without anyone telling me to, I made a quiet decision somewhere around the age of 16 I would build something for myself. Something nobody could give away. Something that was entirely, undeniably mine. I worked my first job at 17. A coffee shop 2 towns over where I'd take the early morning shift before school. I saved every dollar I could. I applied for every scholarship available. I got into college on a combination of academic grants and sheer stubbornness. And I worked 2 jobs all 4 years to cover the rest. I didn't go to parties. I didn't take spring break trips. I didn't buy things I didn't need. While my college friends were decorating dorm rooms and dating and living loudly, I was clocking hours and counting dollars and imagining what my future would look like when I finally built it with my own hands. It was lonely sometimes. I won't pretend otherwise. But I kept going. After college I moved to the city, built a career in marketing. Started small, stayed consistent, grew steadily. I lived in apartments I could afford, nothing glamorous but mine. I cooked my own meals, managed my own finances, asked no one for anything I couldn't provide for myself. And then, 7 years into building this quiet, disciplined, intentional life, I bought the beach house. It was not enormous. It was not the kind of house that makes people gasp when they see the photos. It was modest and warm and a little weathered from years of salt air. And I loved it more than any place I had ever been in my life. 3 bedrooms. A small kitchen with a window that looked out over the water. A wooden porch that creaked when you walked on it. A view of the ocean that, on clear mornings, looked like it was painted just for me. I stood in that empty house the day I got the keys, alone in the quiet, and I cried. Not from sadness. From something much bigger than that. I had done it. All those early mornings and skipped vacations and years of discipline, they had built something real. Something permanent. Something mine. I called my parents that evening to tell them. My father congratulated me with that big warm voice of his. My mother cried a little and said she was proud of me. I remember feeling for just a moment like everything had come full circle. I was wrong about that. Because what I didn't know that evening, what I couldn't have imagined as I stood in my little beach house feeling like I had finally arrived, was that something was already unraveling. Quietly. In the background. Behind the warm voices and the proud words. The life my parents had built was crumbling. And they had already decided, without a single word to me, what the solution would be. The calls started changing that following spring. My father phoned more often. My mother's voice had a quality I couldn't quite name at first, something between forced calm and carefully buried panic. When I asked if everything was okay, they both said the same thing, almost like they had rehearsed it. "Everything is fine, sweetheart. Don't worry about us." I told myself it was nothing, that I was imagining the tension, that my parents were adults who had managed their own lives for decades, and I had no reason to doubt them. I told myself a lot of things. But the truth, the full, devastating, completely blindsiding truth, was already moving toward me like a wave I couldn't see yet. I just didn't know it. And then one Tuesday afternoon my cousin Dina called. Dina is the kind of person who never quite realizes when she's dropped a bomb. She called me that Tuesday the way she always calls, chatty, casual, jumping between 3 topics at once. She asked about my job. She mentioned a family gathering I hadn't heard about. And then in the same breezy tone, she said something that stopped every single thought in my head cold. "Oh, and aren't your parents moving in with you next week? Your mom seemed so relieved when she mentioned it. Said you have plenty of space at the beach house." I remember the exact feeling. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was something more like the sensation of the floor dropping out from underneath you, that weightless, surreal second when your brain is trying to catch up to what your ears just heard and simply cannot make it compute. Moving in with me. Next week. I made some excuse to get off the phone with Dina. I don't even remember what I said. I sat in my car in a parking lot for a long time. I couldn't tell you how long. Just staring at nothing while my mind slowly, reluctantly began to process the information. My parents were moving into my house. Not visiting. Not coming for a few weeks. Moving in. And I had not been asked. I had not been told. I had not been consulted, considered, or even given the basic courtesy of a conversation. Someone had made this decision, and it had apparently already been discussed with Dina, with my mother's friends, with what felt like everyone in the extended family, before a single word reached me. I called my father. His voice was steady, warm even, as if everything was perfectly normal. I asked him directly, calmly because I needed to hear it clearly. "Dad, are you and Mom planning to move into my house?" A brief pause. "Claire, we've been meaning to talk to you about that. Things have been difficult. We've had some setbacks. We didn't want to worry you. You know how you are, you always carry everything so seriously. We figured you have the space, your family." It made sense. "Dad." My voice was very quiet. "Did you sell the house?" Another pause. "We had to. There were debts. Some investments that didn't work out. Your uncle needed help. And then there was, it's complicated, sweetheart. But yes, the house is gone." The house was gone. The house with the blue front door. The garden. My mother's rose bushes. The home I grew up in gone. And the money from the sale, nearly $400,000, had been dispersed. To relatives. To failed investments. To people who had long since taken what they needed and disappeared. Every single cent. I asked him, "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you ask me before deciding to come to my house?" And my father, in the gentlest, most infuriating tone, said, "We didn't think you'd say no." I ended the call shortly after that. I couldn't trust my voice anymore. I sat in my kitchen that night and I let myself feel everything. I didn't push it away. I didn't try to be composed or rational or mature. I let the grief come, and it came fully without mercy, because this wasn't just about the house. This wasn't just about being blindsided or having my boundaries crossed without permission. This was the confirmation of something I had been quietly afraid of my entire adult life. To my parents, without them ever meaning it cruelly, without malice, without even full awareness, I was not a separate person with a separate life and separate sacrifices. I was an extension of them, a resource, a backup plan. All those years of watching them give everything away, of seeing money and security disappear into the hands of people who never gave back. I had assumed naively that they would never turn that same pattern toward me. I was wrong. And that realization, that quiet, devastating realization, hurt more than anything else. I cried for a long time. And then, somewhere around midnight, I stopped. I made tea. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. I walked to my window, the one that looks out over the water, and I watched the dark waves move in the distance. Slow, steady, indifferent. And I thought, not emotionally, not reactively. I thought carefully, because I knew something clearly in that moment. If I let this happen the way they had planned it, if I simply opened my door because I was their daughter and the assumption had already been made, then I would not just be losing space in my home. I would be confirming once and for all that my life, my work, my peace were all negotiable, all available, all subject to the needs of people who had never once extended me the same consideration. I was not willing to confirm that. I loved my parents. I loved my parents. That love was never in question for a single second. But love, real love, honest love, does not require you to disappear. I called my attorney the next morning. We talked for an hour. I then called my financial advisor. I made 2 lists, one of everything I was willing to offer, and one of everything I was not willing to surrender. And then I spent the next 3 days preparing, quietly, clearly, with the kind of calm that only comes when you have finally decided to protect yourself without apology. By the time Friday came, by the time I heard the sound of a car pulling into my driveway, I was ready. Completely, thoroughly, unshakably ready. They arrived at noon. I watched from the window before I opened the door. My father stepped out of the car first, still with that posture of his, that particular way of carrying himself that always suggested he believed things would work out, that charm and confidence were their own kind of currency. He looked tired though, older than I remembered. The weight of everything sat differently on him than it used to. My mother came around from the passenger side. She was holding a potted orchid, delicate and purple, wrapped in a small ribbon. A gift, I realized. A housewarming gift. As though she was arriving somewhere new, and wanted to make a good impression on a home that had been mine for 3 years. Something about that detail cracked me open a little. Not enough to change anything, but enough to remind me that complicated love is still love. I opened the door. I smiled genuinely because despite everything I was about to say, I was glad they were standing there. I was glad they were safe. I was glad they were not alone somewhere, facing this quietly without anyone at all. I made coffee. We sat at my kitchen table. My mother talked about the drive. My father commented on how beautiful the view was, the same way he had the first time he visited years ago. There was a quality to the conversation, bright and careful and hovering just above the real thing, that I recognized immediately. They were waiting to see if I would simply absorb them into my life without the conversation ever needing to happen. I let the small talk settle, and then I reached under the table and I placed 2 envelopes on the surface between us. My father looked at them. My mother went very still. Before we talk about anything else, I said, I need you both to read these. My father picked up the first envelope. Inside was a formal document, prepared by my attorney, outlining what I was willing to offer. A 60-day guest arrangement, rent-free with conditions. No claim to the property. No assumption of indefinite stay. A clearly written, legally sound document establishing that this home was mine. Not a family resource, not a shared asset, not an inheritance they could begin to inhabit by showing up with luggage. My mother opened the second envelope with hands that weren't quite steady. Inside was something different. A set of resources I had personally researched and compiled over the past 3 days. Senior living communities within their financial reach. Government housing assistance programs available in our state. A contact for a financial counselor who specialized in helping people rebuild after significant loss. I had done the research. I had made the calls. I had found real options, not to push them away, but to show them that there was a path forward that didn't require dismantling the life I had built. The silence that followed was the longest of my life. My mother looked up first. Her eyes were full, not angry, just full. Claire, she said softly, we are your parents. I know, I said. And I meant it with every part of me. I know you are. And I love you. But being your parents doesn't make my home yours without asking. And loving you doesn't mean I hand over what I built, because a plan was made without me. My father leaned forward. He started with the words I had expected. Family, sacrifice, everything they had done, where would I be without them? He was not cruel. He was not shouting. He was a man who genuinely believed what he was saying, and that somehow made it harder to hear. I waited until he finished. Then I said slowly, clearly, as kindly as I could manage, Dad, I would not be here without you. I know that. But I am also here because of everything I did when you weren't watching. Every shift I worked. Everything I went without. Every year I chose discipline over comfort. This house exists because of that. Not instead of loving you alongside loving you. And it deserves to be protected. So do I. My father was quiet for a long time. My mother reached across the table and touched my hand. She didn't say anything. But her eyes said something I had needed to see for a very long time, a recognition. A real one. They stayed for 3 weeks. Not 60 days. 3 weeks. My mother helped in the kitchen sometimes. My father and I had our most honest conversations on the porch in the evenings. Quiet ones, slow ones, the kind you can only have after the hard things have already been said. He apologized on the 7th evening. Not a big dramatic speech. Just 4 quiet words while we watched the water. "I'm sorry, Claire." I told him I forgave him. Because I did. They found an apartment before the 3 weeks were up, a modest, manageable place about 40 minutes from me. I helped them move in. I bought them a small lamp for the living room and my mother bought curtains that matched nothing and laughed about it. And for a moment standing in that little apartment it felt like something had been repaired between us. Not fully. But honestly, we are not the same as we were before. I think we are better. Because now the love between us is built on something real. Not assumption, not performance, not the silent agreement that I would always absorb whatever they needed without limits. We are learning to love each other as adults. As separate people. As a family that respects the boundaries that make closeness possible. I still visit. I still call every Sunday. I still care for them. Deeply, genuinely, without resentment. But I do it from a place of wholeness now. Not depletion. And my beach house? It is still standing. Every tile. Every curtain. Every morning I wake up to the sound of the ocean and feel the particular peace that comes from knowing you did not abandon yourself. Not even for the people you love most. It still belongs to me. Completely and unapologetically mine. Here is what this whole experience taught me, and what I want to leave with you before you go. Love is not a blank check. Family is not a reason to erase your own life. And saying no to someone you love is not a betrayal. It is sometimes the most honest thing you can offer them. The people who raised you gave you many things, but they did not give you your ambition. They did not give you your discipline. They did not build what you built for yourself in the years when no one was watching. That belongs to you. Protect it. Not with coldness. Not with cruelty. But with clarity. With kindness. With the quiet, unshakable knowledge that you are allowed to love people fully and still hold your own ground. If this story found you today, I don't think that was an accident. You already know what you need to do. If this resonated with you, share it. Someone in your life needs to hear these words today.